Welcome back to 360 Sports Network. I'm Greg Fitzgerald. With me tonight are our faithful companions of James Dotson and Alex Delaverson. And on this prelude to fantasy football, how goes it out there?
Goes well out here. I'm ready for the preseason to begin and hopefully be able to see my bold predictions of fantasy football players actually do well in the preseason to make me look smarter.
I'm doing well too. Fantasy football has corrupted my mind, so I'm ready to start my leagues and get things rolling.
Tell you what, a day doesn't go by where you just don't stop thinking about who's going to be the number one pick here. Well, tonight we're going to be talking about the top running backs here in fantasy football. James, why don't you start us out and talk a little bit about who your top five are?
Well, I start with number one at running back, and the number one overall in my book is Adrian Peterson. No matter who's under center this year, McNabb, Ponder, Joe Webb, they won't be throwing nearly as often as Brett Favre. And before the Favre days, Peterson was always a number one back, so I expect that to return. At number two, I have Chris Johnson down in Tennessee. Some people might think this is too high after last year's less than stellar performance, but I think he'll rebound nicely with Hasselbeck there or with Jake Locker under center. So I expect not nearly a 2,000-yard season, but I definitely expect a 1,600-yard season, double-digit touchdowns for sure from Johnson. Number three is Ray Rice, also higher than what most people think, but I think that with Willis McGahee gone, Ray Rice is just going to get an astronomical number of touches, and he was already a dual-threat phenom. So I think more touches just makes him that much bigger of a threat. Now, Ricky Williams signing may take away some goal line carries, but he won't touch the ball nearly as much as McGahee did. So I say get Rice with confidence early. Number four, Arian Foster. I expect his numbers to be a bit disappointing compared to last season. Teams now know what to expect when it comes to playing the Texans. They have to defend Schaub, they have to defend Johnson, and they know now they have to defend Foster. So still expect a great year, but I think you need to take Peterson, Johnson, and Rice before him. And then rounding out my top five is Jamal Charles. The only thing that worries me about him is that he was a little bit overweight coming into camp, everybody was saying. But I definitely expect him to take away a lot of carries from Thomas Jones. And that's just going to make him an even more valuable threat out there, another dual-threat running back, which you'll be hearing a lot of tonight, I expect. So look for 1,500 yards from Jamal Charles here.
Interesting. Very interesting. Alex, you're kind of similar from what I understand?
Well, my top running back's Adrian Peterson also. A lot of people do have Arian Foster number one. The thing is with Adrian Peterson, he's been consistently good. 1,300 yards rushing last year, 13 touchdowns. There's no reason why he shouldn't be number one. Offensive coordinator Bill Musgrave has stated that his offense will majorly be involved in giving the ball to Adrian Peterson with rookie Christian Ponder at center. So things only make sense. He will get 300-plus carries and double-digit touchdowns again, and that's for sure. So I think Adrian Peterson's the safest pick if you have the number one pick. Number two, I actually do have Chris Johnson. Of course, now he is holding out. I don't think it should be too much of a problem. I definitely don't think he'll get 2,000 yards again. But once again, the past 3 years, he's been delivering. He had 1,364 rushing yards, 12 touchdowns. So a 4.3 average when rushing the ball, 245 receiving yards. So to me, Peterson, Chris Johnson, the perfect 1-2 combo if you'd have either of the top two choices there. Number three, I have Ray Rice. And thing is, I actually did have Arian Foster go before him. I am a little worried that Ricky Williams will take away some carries from him. However, the thing is, it's not going to be enough to get him away from having, major production like he did last year. He's the premier back. It always will be the premier back. And so I have him at number three. At number four, I have Arian Foster. I had him last year in my draft. He's built just like Adrian Peterson. He's exactly the same height and the same weight. I don't think he's a one-hit wonder. He probably won't have the same production as last year, but he's the best weapon. I mean, other than Andre Johnson on the team. Matt Schaub, Andre Johnson, and Arian Foster. That's a pretty solid offense. So I expect him to perform well still, like he did last year. And at number 5, I have Jamaal Charles. Some people are worried about him splitting carries with Thomas Jones, but I'm not as worried. He still managed to perform well last year and, get great stats for his team, close to 1,500 rushing yards, 8 touchdowns. And he'll have a bigger role again this year. So his 6.4 average yards per carry was tremendous. That's actually the largest amount for yards per carry in the last 10 years. So with an expanded role, an even bigger role, I should say, things will only look up for him. So that rounds out my top 5.
Yeah, that's quite interesting there. And I think you have a really decent point there with Arian Foster and basically, the new triplets down there, except they're not in Dallas, they're in Houston now, with Schaub, Johnson, and Foster. My top 5 are just a little bit different. Obviously, I think we're all in agreement. Our number 1 is Adrian Peterson. And the guy's a beast. I mean, I've seen him just literally run over defensive linemen, linebackers and stuff. I mean, the guy is, his physical presence is incredible. And with Donovan McNabb at the helm over there, I expect Adrian Peterson's carries to be a lot more meaningful because it's not just going to be trash yards. It's going to be interesting stuff because McNabb will be spreading it out a little bit, and which should open up some holes for Adrian Peterson. I'm expecting an 18-touchdown season with about 1,500 yards if he stays healthy. I've got Arian Foster at number 2. I'm just psyched about this guy. I think he's absolutely he's the cat's pajamas. Okay, I'm expecting a 1,600-yard season, 15 touchdowns. The thing that bothered me a little bit about Foster, that kept him out of the number 1 spot in my book, was he gets to be a little bit truculent. He gets a bit of an attitude, and he was benched last year for his attitude and his maturity. If he keeps his head together and he stays healthy, this guy could supplant Adrian Peterson as number 1 guy. But for this time being and for this podcast, he's my number 2 man. Number 3, Jamaal Charles. This is the perfect dual threat. This guy can get you insane rushing yardage. Last year he had 1,467 with 230 attempts, but he also had 45 receptions for 468 yards. I mean, the guy's an animal out there. And granted, if you're trying to look at touchdowns and the number of touchdowns scored, I don't think Jamaal Charles is going to be the touchdown maker for you. But if you're in a league where you get rewarded nicely for yardage and for combos, definitely you'll want to take a look at Jamaal Charles, and that's why I ranked him high at number 3. Chris Johnson I have coming in at number 4. Ever since he hit the 2,000-yard mark 2 years ago, this guy, all eyes have been on this guy to repeat. But he had a little bit of a problem last year, and he's got a little bit of a problem running the ball between the tackles. And I think that's going to prevent him from getting the 2,000 yards that he did back in 2009. But I expect a healthy 1,200-yard season this year with 12 touchdowns as Hasselbeck gets used to that Tennessee offense. And rounding out my top 5, got LaShawn McCoy. Ever since he replaced Brian Westbrook as the Eagles' primary back, this guy has been on fire. And he's a perfect complement to Michael Vick. I mean, the guy can catch the ball. There's a lot of razzle-dazzle. He's an excellent combo-type player where he gets receiving yards. He had 592 receiving yards last year with 1,080 rushing yards. I'll tell you what, Philadelphia is the team. I'm just excited. This just gives me goose pimples. So those are my top 5. James, talk about number 6 through 10.
Well, at number 6, I start with Maurice Jones-Drew. I think that with the addition of Blaine Gabbert, they're going to need to run the ball a little bit more as they work the rookie into the system. But I also think that Jones-Drew is a great threat out of the backfield, and Gabbert's going to look for him a lot. So I expect a lot of rushes, probably 300 rushes, and at least 50 to 60 receptions over the year. So I think we're definitely going to see Mojo get his groove back this year. At number 7, I have Steven Jackson in St. Louis. I think the greatest show on turf starts in the backfield. I think Jackson is just entering his prime with Bradford now in his second year. He's already a great quarterback. I think he's going to improve even more here in his sophomore campaign. So I think 1,800 total yards is definitely not out of question for Steven Jackson, another dual-threat running back getting catches out of the backfield. Number 8, this is where I have LeSean McCoy. He always just sort of worries me. The fact is he just doesn't get the touches that I would like to see in a top 5 running back. He's had a single-digit carries way too many times last year. He averaged a grand total of 12 throughout the entire season. And if you take out a couple of his 20-touch games, his average is in single digits. He's still a game changer, though, so you got to pick him high, but I just got to beware because he doesn't touch the ball enough for my liking. At number 9, I have Darren McFadden. Run DMC, he confuses me. He's great one week, and then he'll do nothing the next week. So I put him pretty average on my board, second-tier running back, but again, I'd love to see more great performances out of McFadden and get rid of some of his 20-yard weeks that he's had. And then finally, rounding out my top 10, hold on, everybody. This one's going to really blow your hats off. Felix Jones. Yes, yeah, exactly, Greg. Mark my words. Felix Jones, as the sole strong back in Dallas, is going to be a absolute contender this year. He already is putting up strong fantasy numbers as the backup running back. Now with the only guy competing with him, Tashard Choice, with Marion Barber gone, I think Felix Jones gets the majority of the touches. Heck, last year, when he was on the field, 80% of the time when he was on the field, he was getting the ball anyway. No matter what the formation, no matter what the play call, he was getting it. So when he's on the field even more this year, I don't expect anything to change because he is a game changer. So I just feel Felix Jones, already a great fantasy pick last year as a number 2 back, can be a great play as a number 1 back. Again, when a lot of people won't put him in their top 20 backs, I got him in the top 10. So,
well, you heard it here first, right here on 360 Sports Network. So,
be ready.
That's okay. Alex, what say you?
Well, I'm not sure how I feel about Felix Jones. I mean, I think he'll be good, but top 10 running back, I'm not sure. At number 6, I have Rashard Mendenhall. I might not agree with his views on politics, and this guy does have a nasty habit of fumbling at the wrong time, but Mendenhall proved to be a reliable touchdown producer last season. I mean, with scores in 11 of 16 weeks. You know, he's among the most desirable fantasy backs for this reason and probably a target for fantasy owners during the draft in the early part of the second round in most leagues. So I have him starting out at number 6. Number 7, I actually have Maurice Jones-Drew. I think he's going to be a pretty good back. The thing is with him, though, he has been injured last year with his knee injury, and reports are saying that's still lingering. But, you know, his 94.6 yards a game is pretty impressive. And now that Gabbert's under center, you know, and still even Garrard, he's going to be the main weapon there. He's going to be carrying the workload, so I have him at number 7. At number 8, I have Steven Jackson. And, you know, this year his value is considerably lessened. Ironic as it sounds, it's mostly because the missing pieces in St. Louis have finally fallen into place. The team now has a talented young starting quarterback and several receivers to allow for a respectable passing game. And working against Jackson is that some observers believe he has lost a step. I don't think so. I don't think that's the case. But even if it's true, we can't say we believe the wheels have completely fallen off. I mean, he had 7 games of 80 or more yards rushing last year, and he proved to be a consistent back for fantasy owners. So I have him at number 8. At number 9, I have LeSean McCoy. I'm still kind of iffy about him. They now have Ronnie Brown back there. He has a tendency to split carries. But, you know, me being a Pitt fan, I watched him ever since, you know, he was in college. This guy is the real deal. You know, he's a great pass catcher. He's going to be racking up points, and this year's only going to get better. And at number 10, I have Darren McFadden. Some people are a little concerned about trusting having a starting running back play for the Raiders last year. He barely got to 1,200 yards. He actually didn't. But, he had 10 scores. But the Raiders have a deep backfield, which, they added in April. But McFadden now has the starting gig himself. And Hugh Jackson even hinted that he'd like to see his back take on more touches. I mean, it is a possibility because for the first time in a long time, McFadden has a clean bill of health. So expect big things out of the running back in Oakland.
Yeah, I see big things coming out of Darren McFadden. That's why I got Run DMC at number 6 on my end over here. He's been under the radar for quite some time, as you said earlier, mostly because he plays for the Raiders.
Exactly.
But you take a look at his past performances. He had six 100-plus yard rushing games toward the end of the season in 2010 that put him in the top 10 for running backs coming into 2011 here. And he does have a tendency to get dinged up. But I expect a 1,300-yard season out of Run DMC and 10 touchdowns, as he is going to be one of the key components of the Jason Campbell-led offense under the new regime over there in Oakland. Coming in at number 7, I got old Ray Rice. He is now the main back in Baltimore, well, until Ricky Williams came on board.
He's still the main back, I promise you that.
He still is the main back, yeah. Ricky Williams will steal some TDs away from him, much like Willis McGahee he did to a certain extent. But, now that Willis has moved on to Denver, Ray has a track history of being a great receiving back. And why I'm rating him at number 7 is partially because Ricky Williams is there. He's going to steal some touchdowns away. But he's also a top 10 running back because Derek Mason's now gone, and Todd Heap is now gone. And Ray Rice is going to become a quasi tight end. And I'm going to see Joe Flacco kind of explore the underneath game by having Ray Rice run some patterns up the middle, sort of the way Bill Belichick has Wes Welker doing some of that type of stuff up there in New England. And you're going to see Ray Rice with a ton of receiving yards. So I expect him to be a big-time factor in Baltimore. Maurice Jones-Drew, the Mojo Man down in Jacksonville. The only reason why he's in the top 10 is because he's their only offensive threat in Jacksonville. With everybody kind of being shipped off hither, tither, and yon here. He had a disappointing season last year with only 5 touchdowns and 2 receiving touchdowns. But I expect him, if he stays healthy, to post, I think, close to 15 touchdowns this season coming up here. He should also have some decent receiving yards as well. Number 9, got Michael Turner from the Atlanta Falcons there. Michael Turner has recaptured the form from when he first came to Atlanta, posting 1,371 rushing yards last year after a disappointing 2009 season. So now this guy's not a pass catcher. He's basically pure speed back. He runs a lot like LaDainian Tomlinson. He's going to have a lot of holes that he's going to be running through here. So, and with Julio Jones being drafted by Atlanta, I expect big things out of Michael Turner this year. I expect a 1,400-yard rushing season with about 13 touchdowns. So, and then number 10, Rashard Mendenhall. And here's a great back that's got a Twitter problem. If we can just keep him off Twitter and just keep him focusing on football, this guy, he's predictable as heck, though, I'll tell you. I mean, he's got a punishing, grind-him-out style. He's not flashy. He's just a standard power back. Expect a dozen touchdowns this year and about 1,400 rushing yards. Expect a lot of goal line things going on with Mendenhall. He's going to get you ugly yardage, and that's why he's in the top 10, because he will get you the ugly yardage. And ugly does win in fantasy football. Okay, let's see, 11 through 15. James, what do you got there?
Well, first let me ask you, if you think Mendenhall has a Twitter problem, what do you say Ocho Cinco has?
Ocho Cinco is just a mental case.
Well put, well put. At number 11, I start with Frank Gore in San Francisco. He concerns me because he only had 5 total touchdowns last year. Frisco just doesn't get in the end zone enough as it is, and Frank Gore being the top prospect out there, not getting into the end zone enough. He wasn't even the leading touchdown getter on his team rushing the ball. Brian Westbrook had more rushing touchdowns than Frank Gore did last year. So that really, it opens my eyes, and that's what keeps him out of the top 10 for me. I still think he's going to get you enough yards to be a solid Tier 2, top Tier 3 running back, though. Number 12, this is where Mendenhall drops for me. I think you guys have pretty much said it. He's fumbleitis. The Steelers are not running the Jerome Bettis type pounded down the middle offense. And I'm not even sure about getting goal line carries. I think Red Zone Redmond, Isaac Redmond, is getting more goal line touches this year. So I like a bunch of other guys before Mendenhall this year. Number 13, D'Angelo Williams in Carolina. I think the contract says it all. They gave him a 5-year, $43 million deal, and they didn't give Jonathan Stewart any kind of extension. They didn't even try to. And I think the big swing in salary between those two backs, I think you're going to see the carries kind of tilt the same way towards Williams' favor this year. So look for Williams to have a breakout year this year, having fewer carries taken away from him. Number 14, Michael Turner. He's just getting older, and you got Matty Ice throwing it a lot more than he has before. Between Julio Jones, Roddy White, and Tony Gonzalez, Michael Turner barely cracks the top 15 because he is still Michael Turner in a high-powered offense. And then rounding him out, the top 15, LeGarrette Blount. I would put him as a top 10 back this year. He really impressed me last year, but there was really no improvements made around him. So because of that, he just barely cracks my top 15. All right, Alex, how about you? Where do you got everybody in the 11 through 15 slot?
Well, at number 11, I have Frank Gore. I mean, all I can really say about him is another season and another injury. When Gore wraps up his playing career, the Smithsonian may want to display a list of everything he's actually had fixed. I mean, it's getting kind of ridiculous.
A $6 million man.
Jeez, I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, he'd be a top 3 back if it wasn't for his injuries every year. I mean, he had 853 rushes last year, only 5 TDs, and his body can only take so much. But if he stays healthy, and I'm hoping he will, he'll be one of the best backs in the league, and he'll produce for San Francisco. So I have him at number 11. At 12, like Dotson said, Michael Turner. How much longer can he keep pounding the ball? I mean, he led the league in carries last year with 334, and during one late stretch, he carried 23 or more times, 5 games in a row. That's a lot of work. I mean, perhaps it's also why Turner seemed to break down late in the year. He still had close to 1,400 yards rushing and 12 touchdowns, so he's still a weapon. Yes, the Falcons will probably be throwing more, but they're not going to ignore the best weapon they have. So I have Michael Turner at number 12. Number 13, I have Matt Forte. He was definitely a let down for fantasy owners last year. He barely cracked 1,000 yards, didn't even get to 10 touchdowns. But he rebounded nicely following Chicago's bye, and he finished the year having registered a total of 6 games of 90 or more yards. Since joining the league in 2008, people don't know this. Only him, Chris Johnson, Adrian Peterson, Maurice Jones-Drew, and Steven Jackson have earned more yards from scrimmage in Forte, and with the lack of receiving talent around him, it's not exactly hard to see why. But there is a slim downside, though. He did experience a jump in both receiving yards and scores last year. His catch total dropped for the 2nd consecutive season. It's a small point, but a point to be made nonetheless. You know, that's a point for people that see him as a multi-purpose back. I have Peyton Hillis at number 14. You know, he doesn't have to worry about the Madden curse. He's already cursed for playing so well last year and playing for the Browns. And the thing is, does anyone really think he can repeat 1,100 yards rushing, 13 touchdown campaign? I mean, that's not going to happen. He already showed signs of decline last year when his average per carry dropped from 4.78 in his first 8 games to sputtering 3.82 over the season's second half. So there is much work for him to be done. But if he's hot, he's one of the best in the game. He's 240 pounds, 6'1". Kind of reminds me of Jerome Bettis. But he'll still be a reliable running back for someone to get in the second or third round if they need a running back. And at number 15, I have LeGarrette Blount. While some believe his runs don't carry the force expected of a 240-pounder, Blount can point to his 5-point-yard average as proof of his production. Tampa Bay is an up-and-coming offense, especially with Josh Freeman. The thing is, Blount figures to be a central cog in the machine. With 6 efforts of 80-plus yards in 13 games, he has shown he can offer the type of weekly output fantasy owners need from him. So, in case you can't tell, I'm very high on LeGarrette Blount. And that rounds out my 15 running backs.
You know, we got some similarities and we got some big-time differences here. One of our similarities, I think all three of us have Frank Gore rated at number 11. This is a guy who, if he could stay healthy, would be a top 3, maybe even a top 5, actually top 5, maybe a top 3 running back. But once again, injuries, part of the whole thing, which is what brings him down to the number 11. But if he stays healthy, and with Coach Harbaugh in the mix over there, I expect him to have 11 touchdowns with about 1,100 rushing yards if he stays healthy. Ahmad Bradshaw I got at number 12. Once again, Bradshaw, when healthy, posted numbers similar to Tiki Barber with 1,235 yards rushing in 2010 with 8 touchdowns. What brings him down on this list, however, is Brandon Jacobs, who's looming behind him, taking rushing yards and TDs away. So until they get things straightened out over there in Giantland, Ahmad Bradshaw is going to be, he's definitely a top 15 guy, but I have him ranked at number 12 because of that. And also Bradshaw has a tendency to fumble the ball as well. He's got to kind of hold on to that ball a little bit better as well. Number 13, LeGarrette Blount. Now, I am really, really high on this guy. This guy came on the scene in Fuego last year. The Pewter and Orange, he put them back on the map with Josh Freeman and, you got Mike Williams, and now all of a sudden you've got LeGarrette Blount. And this guy is a power north-south runner. He's a flashier version of Rashard Mendenhall, and he doesn't have a Twitter problem.
That's the most important aspect.
That's right. I expect 1,200 yards out of him this year with 13 touchdowns as he proves his worth again. This guy, he's a beast. He has it all. He's got the talent set, no doubt about it. Number 14, I've got Matt Forte from the Bears and Mike Martz, who is also known as the Mad Scientist, is going to be dialing up some plays for Matt Forte. Matt Forte, he's had an interesting season last year. He posted 1,069 yards with 6 touchdowns, but there are times where when he's not in the game, he's really not in the game, and many fantasy owners pulled their hair out in frustration because he just was not a consistent mix. One thing that is certain, though, is Chicago has not fixed their receiving problem. And Matt Forte's got some big soft hands, and he does like to catch the ball from time to time. So I expect a lot of yak coming out of Matt Forte with 500 yards receiving and 4 touchdowns as well. So if you need a guy that good 4th or 5th round running back, I expect Matt Forte to be kind of hanging in that mix over there for that. And number 15, Knowshon Moreno with the Denver Broncos. Yes. The addition of John Fox to Denver and the parting of McDaniels and a more conventional run-first approach now is going to put Knowshon Moreno back on the map. Now, I was doing a little bit of thinking about all this stuff, and that's why I put Knowshon at number 15. During the weeks 10 through 14 of the season, Knowshon Moreno averaged 19 fantasy points per game. That's when Denver knew that they weren't going to be doing a whole heck of a lot, and they went back to a more conventional offense because Josh McDaniels' days were numbered over there. And John Fox has done wonders with power backs out there. You saw what he did down there in Carolina with DeAngelo Williams and Stewart down there. So I anticipate a similar type of situation where you're going to have Knowshon Moreno and Willis McGahee kind of duking it out there. But with Kyle Orton not being as reliable, let's say, and if there's a little bit of a quarterback controversy, we get Tim Tebow out there, I expect a lot of rushing attempts and a lot of yards coming out of Knowshon Moreno. So it's my top 15.
So we got Felix Jones and Knowshon Moreno as potential breakout players this year. I'm not sure which one I would agree with more. Though
Now,
I think,
what's interesting is I did not have Steven Jackson in the mix.
I was just about to point that one out.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that.
Let's hear it, mad scientist.
Well, Steven Jackson's getting a little long on the tooth right now. His numbers are dropping. And now, this does not take away from anything that this guy's done or has done or anything like that. His body of work, this guy's definitely a Hall of Fame running back. But Steven Jackson's productions, it's the law of diminishing returns that's happening right now. And I really think that he's just going to kind of fade off. He'll probably have a 1,000-yard season this year. He will definitely help the offense, but there comes a point in time where his numbers have been steadily trailing off, and that's why I didn't include him in the mix.
Yeah, but I mean, do you really think they would put Moreno in front of Jackson, though? You said he's been declining. I mean, his rushing yards have declined a little bit, but he still had more touchdowns than he did in 2009, and his receiving yards went up, too. I could see a little bit of a decline in the rushing yards, but like I said, everything else seems to be going up pretty high. I mean, he's only 28 years old.
Yeah, you know what? Okay, yeah, I got Moreno at 15. Steven Jackson, 15A.
Oh, yeah, 15A, B, C, D.
There we go. I mean, there's not a whole lot of separation there. I mean, well, you can say there is. You have youth versus not so youthful, but Steven Jackson has a tendency to get dinged up a bit, too. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all pans out. But I did not think that Steven Jackson should be in the top 15 just because of that situation. And what separates him from Knowshon Moreno is Knowshon Moreno has a bigger upside right now.
Well, one thing I like to say about Felix Jones, he did almost have 1,000 yards rushing last year, although he did only have 2 touchdowns. But he had 450 receiving yards, so he did have over 1,000 all-purpose yards there, and Marion Barber's not there. Although I still don't think he'll be a top 10 back. He's definitely, I think, more of a... He has a better chance of being that breakout player than Moreno does. Like I said, the only thing that really bothered me, he had 2 touchdowns last year, and then the year before he only had 3. And even the year before that, he only had 3. So, but I still think he'll be decent.
The only concern I have about Felix Jones is that you might have an injury concern, which is why I would say if you get Felix Jones to try to piggyback later on and pick up Tashard Choice. I don't worry about the touchdown issue because you had Marion Barber taking away a lot of the goal line carries. Between Tashard Choice and Felix Jones, Tashard isn't a power back compared to Felix Jones, so I don't think you're going to have goal line carries taken away like Barber did for him last year. So I think you'll see the touchdown numbers rise. And he's just a playmaker. He'll get the ball, he'll get lots of yards and lots of touches, and I think that's what's going to make him a top back.
One person I noticed we didn't even mention as a potential breakout player was Benjarvis Green-Ellis. He did get over 1,000 yards and had 13 touchdowns last year. And actually, now that I think about it, I mean, maybe he'd be my 15B. So what do you guys think?
If Benjarvis Green-Ellis were with a different team, yeah, I'd say definitely he's a top 15 guy, maybe even a top 10 guy. But because he's with New England, he's not even on the list.
Not to mention all the carries that the new Kevin Falk, that is Danny Woodhead, takes away from him too. You'll see Danny Woodhead in there for 3 or 4 series at a time. You won't even see Ben, Jarvis, Green, or Ellis out there. So I think you got to keep them, all New England running backs, just under principle out of your top 15, probably even your top 20 as well.
So, in this whole mix that we talked about, who's the major dark horse? Everybody loves to prognosticate the dark horse here, especially going into fantasy football drafts. James, who's your dark horse?
Well, I'm going to go with somebody, well, you know my feelings about Felix Jones, so I'm going to go with somebody else who is not even in any of our top 15, and that is Javid Best out of Detroit. Word just came out a couple days ago now that Mikel Ashore is out for the year with a Achilles tendon tear. So they, as a result, had to sign 2 new running backs off of free agency within 24 hours of that injury happening. So to me, that says that Javid Best is the best option out there. All the other ones that they have are guys straight off of free agency. So you're going to see even more carries out of Javid Best than we've seen in the past. Again, my only issue is that he has been injury prone in the past before too. So we got to be a little concerned about that. But I think that Javid Best out of the backfield in Detroit, we could see some old Barry Sanders type plays out of there.
There you go. How about you, Alex? Who's your dark horse?
Well, I have a few, actually. I was going to say Javid Best also, but I'd just be repeating everything Dotson said, so I guess I'll try and find someone else. I think Reggie Bush could actually have a great year there. Some people think, Daniel Thomas probably is going to be the starter, even though he's only a rookie. But Reggie Bush just has so much talent. I mean, I know a lot of people were concerned that it wasn't going to transfer into the NFL, and obviously then the way everyone was hoping it would. But for a guy who's only 26 years old and can return punts, catch the ball pretty well, he can still do everything. So Miami does like to use Wildcats and things like that. If they can use Reggie Bush and he can be a phenom again, even though it might be a little tough, but he has the potential to be something special.
You know, I like that Reggie Bush thing. As a matter of fact, you kind of stole my thunder a little bit there. I think, yeah, definitely he's a dark horse. But I'm going to give you another dark horse here. Ryan Matthews. Mm-hmm. The highly talented running back that everybody was just clamoring for last year whenever he was supposed to be the next LaDainian Tomlinson. The old slice and dice guy who ended up slicing and dicing his ankles. So if he can keep his ankles healthy, this guy is a high-risk, high-reward candidate. And really, I think with the proclivity toward the passing game right now, it's going to open up a lot of holes for Ryan Matthews, and I think he'll surprise a lot of people. So I look at him as a dark horse as well. I'll tell you the guy, though, that I actually am just really enamored with, and we covered him already, is LeGarrette Blount. This guy is just, he's an exciting Mendenhall-style runner. I mean, the guy just is a power runner. He's exciting to watch, and he just brings a supercharge to the Tampa Bay offense. So if you can get LeGarrette Blount in rounds 3, 4, or 5, go for him. Because I'll tell you what, he will pay high dividends for you. And he's the type of guy that's not going to get dinged up as well.
Yeah, I'm afraid your secret might be out, though. I've done a couple mock drafts over the past 24 hours, and I've seen LeGarrette Blount go as high as pick number 22. 22 in one draft and 25 in the other draft in a 12-team league. So... So sadly, a lot of people are also sharing your thoughts, but I agree LeGarrette Blount is a great look. I worry about the sophomore slump, but I think he is definitely a risk worth taking in the late second or early third round for sure.
Oh, yeah. Now, let's talk about potential busts. Who do you see in this mix? A top 10, 15, even top 20 running backs that could be the guy that's going to leave your head hanging and shaking and thinking, my God, why in the hell did I do what I did?
Well, if it's like LeGarrette Blount, you're in trouble there, so.
Yeah.
Well, on my end, this is probably another shocker. It's a top 5 back for one of us. It's LeSean McCoy. And nothing against Pitt fans. I love McCoy, and the fear of the number of touches he gets, I saw too often last year where he only had single-digit touches. I mean, he gets some good yards, but yards aren't going to do it for you. You got to get more touches to get more yards, and you got to get it in the end zone. He just did not touch the ball enough for my liking. I can see when you have the Mike Vick show out there in Philadelphia, I can see trouble brewing for LeSean McCoy. So just be careful.
Okay. How about you, Alex?
Well, like I said earlier, Frank Gore. When is this guy not hurt? I mean, I basically said everything before. I mean, he could be extremely great or he's going to be a complete bust. I'm not so sure how Maurice Jones-Drew is going to hold up necessarily. Like I said before, he's going to carry a lot of the workload with Gabbert under center, even though Garrard, well, I'm sure, will start most of the time. But I don't think Garrard's enough of a starter to keep Gabbert out of there. They're going to be putting 8 in the box most of the time. Jacksonville doesn't have any other weapons. So, I mean, Maurice Jones-Drew, I had him at 7, but he has the potential to fall all the way off the list if things just fall apart in Jacksonville.
Interesting. I'll tell you, I've got a couple guys that are potential busts. One I just mentioned as possible as a major dark horse, perhaps. He could also be a major bust, and that's Ryan Matthews. So you got to be careful whenever you're drafting this guy because injuries, if his ankles aren't fully healed, he will disappear on you, and Tolbert will end up stealing the show over there. But a guy that I was really disappointed in last year, and I had him in one of my leagues, was Maurice Jones-Drew, MJD. He's a slow starter traditionally. And whenever he just didn't show up for almost, 5 games in the season last year, he was killing me. You know, and it's like, you got to drop this guy. And I hated like heck to drop the guy, but, you can only create so many spots by benching the guy. But even benching him, and you see what his production was doing, you have guys like Peyton Hillis that were actually stealing his thunder from a fantasy perspective. So, I see a potential bust here with Maurice Jones-Drew. If he comes off with another slow start, he's not going to have the same rushing yards that he had last year. I think it's going to be a little bit less. But the upside to this guy is he's the only offense right now in Jacksonville, as everything's been shipped out.
Well, I mean, we do agree that Maurice Jones-Drew is the most likely to end up as a bust. Thing is, for someone who's 5'7", players that are that small usually can't take much wear and tear, and it's been hinted all offseason that his carries are going to drop, and like you said, there's not many other weapons there in Jacksonville.
Well, and he's not your average 5'7" guy either, though. Remember that. This is the guy who is flattening linebackers who are blitzing right at him, and he's putting them on their backs. I mean, this isn't a 5'7", 155-pounder who's running into Joe Paterno up in Happy Valley. This is Maurice Jones-Drew, the guy who will flatten a 300-pound lineman.
Yeah, but he has been having lingering knee issues, so, I mean, that's another reason.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at his age, and you look at all the stuff that's happening right now, the numbers just aren't stacked in his favor right now. Now, if he goes out and has this, I want him to prove me wrong. And MJD, if you're out there following us on Twitter, call me. Call me out, please, because I want to believe in you, but I just can't right now. Well, that just about does it here for us with our top 15 running backs because of the veritable plethora of receivers that are out there. Our next podcast is going to deal with the top 20 wide receivers instead of the top 15, so we have to get our pencils sharpened and our thinking caps on and eat our Wheaties before we go to work on this one. But until then, I'm Greg, James is over there, and Alex. You all have a good one, and enjoy the preseason game this Friday. Good night.